I don't remember if there was a TV show or a book or what, but the park is what I remember. I never went to it, not really, but I remember hearing Mom talk about it a lot. It was called Fender's Grotto, and she said that when she was a kid, it was just about the best place on earth. Dr. Winter's pen stopped mid-scratch. Fender's Grotto. Why did that sound so familiar? Had one of her other patients said something about it once? She didn't know, but it was possible that one of her poor broken lambs had bleated something about it as she took them to the paddock where they'd be safe. It sounds as if it's a place that is no longer open, so how is it that you came to be there? The girl in her early 20s, not yet old enough to dull such things with alcohol and time, so she had come to someone she trusted for help. She had come to Pamela Winters. Well, we weren't supposed to be there, she admitted, her eyes fogging over as she lay back and slipped into her memories. But Fender's Grotto was just too cool to pass up. It was in a little inlet, a stretch of beach that butted up to the ocean. It was full of water now, but when the tide went out, it was a magical place. Fender's Grotto had once been a large theme park, a place of wonder and mystery. Mom had some pictures of it, and it looked like the park basically had 4 parts. A forest area made of big trees that were like a play place full of slides and ball pits and things. A giant mountain with a face that spoke sometimes. It had a roller coaster inside of it. A fair that was supposed to be some kind of country fair with rides. And a beach near the dam that kept the water out, which was a water park with pools and wave pools and such. Mom said it was the greatest place ever, but it wasn't to last. The show started to lose popularity, the toys and merchandise weren't selling, and attendance at the park went way down. The park tried desperately to remain relevant. They got roving mascots, they added more rides to the fair area, they held shows and special events, but it wasn't meant to be. The park closed its gates in 1985, but they weren't sure what to do with the park after that. It sat there, slowly falling into disrepair, and Mom said that she and some of her friends would sneak in to explore and stuff sometimes. There was talk that the park would begin selling some of the rides off, but it seemed like they were hoping that it would bounce back and they could open again. A hurricane that sprang up in '91 took the decision away from them. It broke the dam that regulated the water for the fake beach and flooded the park. The dam had been in disrepair since the park closed, but the added pressure had caused it to burst, flooding the grotto and placing the park underwater. It was a total loss, nothing salvageable, and the park and the grotto were abandoned, left to a watery grave. And every night at 9:45, as the tide ebbs, the park comes back into view for 3 or 4 hours before the tide rushes back in after midnight and floods the park again. I had rolled my eyes when Candace told me, flicking the butt of my cigarette at her. Yeah, right, Candace. Sounds like one of those internet stories to me. No, Candace insisted. It's real. I've seen it. I read about it online, and the other night I biked out there to see if it was true, and it's legit. The whole park is uncovered. I looked over at Matt, but he just shrugged. Wasn't like we had anything better to do. There's only a couple of days left till Halloween, so why not have a little adventure? I couldn't argue with that, and we decided to go check it out. There were 4 of us. Candace was our resident internet explorer, Matt and I were heavy into scene kid stuff, and Emma was our token goth girl. Together, we formed a weird square of high school oddness, and the other kids were more than happy to let us know about it. We didn't get invited to social gatherings, we weren't on the guest list for parties, and we had no interest in sports. We generally ended up hanging out together, and sometimes that led us to explore strange places. Graveyards, abandoned buildings, older parts of town that might be haunted, and now, Fender's Grotto. It was October, the spooky month, and a little exploration seemed in order. We all told our parents that we were spending the night at Emma's house on Halloween, like we usually did. Emma's parents were old, like nearly 60, and they had been hippies back before she was born. They were constantly going out of town for concerts or festivals, and Emma usually was left on her own. We helped her fill that void by staying over, though we didn't usually tell our parents there were no adults there. So, at about 8, just as the streetlights were coming on and the kiddos were heading home, we set out for the spot. Hanging a left on Bulwark, we headed for the little-used South Beach area. There had been a bonfire on the beach that night, and as many of the participants left for home, we rode towards the spot where Candace said the grotto was. "Hey, your mom's been there before, right?" Candace asked, and when I nodded, she smiled, showing her braces. "Did she tell you about it?" She said in its own way it was better than Disneyland. She had watched the show on TV as a kid, so she liked being able to see all her favorite characters. She always liked this character that moved by playing hopscotch. Like, I think that was even the character's name. She's got a picture with her somewhere at home, this green puppet thing with pigtails and googly eyes. She really liked the place. I think sometimes she wished she could go back. Matt was nodding. My mom watched it too. She liked Corfin, the big blue one. She used to have a stuffed animal of him, but I think she sold it. I haven't seen it on her bed lately, and when I asked, she said it must have gotten lost. I looked it up online, though, and the ones in good condition go for thousands. I guess the merchandise has gotten a little rare. My mom never talks about it, Candace said. Mine either, Emma chimed in. Well, Matt's mom and my mom grew up in Santa Cairn. I think the show was mostly a local phenomenon. I know a lot of kids in California were wild about it, but Disney kind of put a nail in its coffin after the 80s. Both your parents weren't born here, so maybe they hadn't heard of it. We were thinking about that, me trying to figure out how they had justified building a theme park for a show that was only really popular in California, when we came to a hill where Candace said she could see the park. "See?" she said, dropping her bike and pointing to the spot below. "I told you it was here." We all set our bikes down and came to the hill to find that, sure enough, there was a whole theme park down there. "Wow," I breathed, realizing Mom had been right. "It's beautiful." Calling the place a theme park might have been a little too grand. The park was smaller than Disneyland, about half the size, in fact, but it was weird to think that all of this had just been down here my whole life, and I'd never known about it. I knew Fender's Grotto was something the locals wanted to sweep under the rug for some reason, but why not destroy the place if you were so worried about people remembering it? Maybe they thought the ocean would do it for them. Maybe they thought it would be best not to bring attention to it, but now I think they might have had some inkling about what was going on in the place. I think they were afraid of it and wanted to pretend it didn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind, as the saying goes. "How long did you say we had before the tide comes back in?" I asked, feeling the itch to explore. "About 3 hours and change," Candace said, smiling as she noticed my excitement. "Then, let's get started," I said, half running down the hill as my friends followed behind me. Walking through the old ticket booth to get in was like a scene in Spirited Away, the one where they walk through the seemingly abandoned town. It was all bloated with seawater, barnacles, and shells spattering the outside. Everything had a heavy aroma of salt water. It was in surprisingly good shape for the amount of time it had spent underwater, but we still tried to be careful what we touched. The metal was spotted with rust, some of it eaten through entirely, and as we came into the main street of the grotto, I saw dead fish and things lying across the street and on some of the accent pieces. "So where to?" I asked. "Left will take us to the forest area, and right will take us to the fair area." I looked at my friends, but they all seemed to be staring at the mountain that lay across the park. When the tide was in, I imagined that the top of the mountain looked like a little island as it poked out above the water. The park had been built into a little dip, the park sitting well below the waterline by a wide margin. and the mountain that looked over them looked absolutely massive. The one glaring eye on the left side of the mountain didn't help much, and the gaping mouth that now hung perpetually open was extremely off-putting. I couldn't imagine being here when this thing was talking, the giant eyes moving and the mouth opening and closing. I think, even as a teen, it would have scared the hell out of me. "Let's head to the forest area," Candace said, going left as the others fell in behind her. As we walked, I heard the shutter of Emma's camera. Emma was a shutterbug, had been since middle school, and she didn't travel anywhere without her Nikon. She had a digital camera. They were just starting to get really popular when I was in high school, but she preferred something with real film. Her parents had set her up a studio in the basement, a sorry present for forgetting her birthday a few years ago, and it was pretty much where she lived sometimes after shooting a bunch of pictures. She liked to experiment with different kinds of film development methods, and some of them were pretty impressive. We had just entered the towering trees. Some of them rusted through with time, but others were still standing proud, when Emma came up behind me and tapped my shoulder. "Something's following us," she whispered. Emma wasn't someone who said a lot, and when she did speak, it seemed special somehow. Matt and I turned, Candace stopping a few feet away after she realized that we had stopped, and we looked into the gloom and the shell of the main street. At first, none of us saw anything, but it was hard to miss the shadow that shifted back into the storefront. It was large, a bulbous thing with grotesque dimensions, and it was hard not to see it. We stood for a moment, not daring to move, before I shook my head and suggested we move further in. If it's just someone exploring, then maybe they'll leave us alone. If it was a cop or some security guard, then they could have already called out, and we'd have known that they were trying to kick us out. The fact that they're trying to stay hidden means that they don't know who we are either, so maybe we can just avoid each other. We proceeded under the towering trees, but I think more than one of us felt eyes watching us go. The trees had once been connected with slides and rope bridges, but most of those had either broken off or rotted away. I was sure it was an impressive spot when it was new, the rope bridges and the long slides leading into rope courses and the whole thing leading to the ball pit and bouncy nested areas. But at night, with all the netting rotting away and the broken bits of slide hanging around, it was extremely creepy. "Look," Candace half whispered, and I turned to find a lumpy-looking house that appeared to be slumped at the center of the plastic forest. What's more, I recognized it. That's the house in my mom's picture," I said, walking faster. "The one she got the picture of hopscotch in front of." Sure enough, there was a faded hopscotch board painted on the concrete in front of the lumpy-looking house. There was a placard near the door, but it was hard to read. All I could make out was Mama's house from it, and the rest was just random letters wrought in bronze. "Hey, Emma, get a picture of us here so I can show my mom. She'll never..." But I turned back and found that Emma was gone. "Emma," I called, Matt calling her name, and Candace and I went to look around. "Emma," I yelled, starting to get worried, but it was in vain. Emma was just gone. "You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our ghostly reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.